can stop me, no, nothing can. I can, and I will. You keep on watching, don't take your eyes off me. That you can't deny. Confident and gracious while stacking up paper on top of her game.
Hey, all my beauties and bees out there, thank you so much for joining us again on this Thursday. Today I have Mollie Kallen with MKCM Case Management. She is an entrepreneur, she is a friend, and she is an advocate that I love to talk to, so I'm bringing her here to you. Thank you so much, Mollie, for joining us.
Thanks so much, Angel, for having me.
So for those of you who are not within the work comp realm or insurance realm, I'm going to have Mollie tell you a little bit about her and her company, because it is amazing and it's helping so many people out there. Mollie, can you talk a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. Thanks so much for this opportunity. So I've been in the workers' comp industry, 30 years. I started when I was 5, like many others of us. Yes. I've been doing case management for that long of time, and I've had my company, MKCM, for about almost 15 years now. And my journey is not unlike a lot of other people's journeys. I started doing this for the big companies. And it's funny, I always tell people as I lecture across the country, nobody graduates high school or college and says, I'm going to go into workers' comp. Nobody says that. You always get into workers' compensation indirectly. And most of us are kind of pulled in that direction. You have no experience and you learn on the job. It's all on the job training. And then I always tell people that workers' comp is very black or white. There's no gray. You love it or you hate it. And even the people who complain about it, and we all complain, they leave. You see them on LinkedIn, like 2 months later, they're back in. Yeah, because there's a certain type of niche to our business, a passion to it. One thing I always begin my speeches with when I'm talking across the country is thanking people like you, who are in this business, and we don't get thanked enough. And you don't get recognized. And, we go and do our job day in and day out, and you kind of lose sight of what a difference you make in people's lives on a daily basis, especially with everything that's going on with COVID. But when you're dealing with people who are injured, sometimes catastrophic injuries, what a difference. But I started this company after doing this job as a case manager with other companies for 30 years. And I thought, why do we have to have huge, big companies that will incentivize case managers to overbill, that kind of dilute down the beauty of what we do, make communication difficult? Why don't just kind of get through all that red tape and do my own company? And really, Angel, it was just going to be me, myself, and I. I mean, it wasn't like I sat down one day and had this dream that I was going to have this national company and it was all going to fall into place. I mean, it totally was kind of like a domino effect. Absolutely. Yeah. And, one day I wake up and it's me. I'm in my office in my home and it's just me. And then like 15, 14 years later, we have over 450 plus case managers across the country. And it's such a blessing. I'm so lucky. I have such a great team and we're like a family. And I just love what I do. And I have such a passion for what I do.
I think that what you said is really a key. You said we're like a family. And so many times, I mean, we all work and we spend just as much time with our colleagues as we do with our own family at home. And so that work culture, that corporate culture makes a big difference on, how we're working, how we're feeling. And, when we talk about, let's say, the person as a whole, or workers' compensation and employment law, all of those different things, it really boils down to the person. And we're all people, and we want to be treated with respect, and we want to be treated with the ability to give the tools that we want to do to make a difference, especially in workers' comp, because we are dealing with injured workers. And, our goal, I think everybody across the realm, whether you are, in medical, you are an adjuster, you are an insurance, defense attorney, applicant attorney, the goal is really to assist our injured workers. And with that, when you have people who know their stuff, like your nurses, and I can say, we've used your company in multiple, different companies along the way. And your nurses are so knowledgeable, and their customer service is amazing. And I've even gotten feedback from, employees who are like, oh yeah, when we had any questions, we could call them, and they didn't feel like they were being bothered. So that's a culture that you promote, right, Molly?
Thank you. You take the words right out of my mouth. One thing I talk about when I lecture too is about empowerment. We're a team. All of us in workers' comp, you mentioned the attorneys, the injured worker, the employer, the case manager, the doctors, the providers. And part of what our job as the case manager is kind of like the glue of that team. We're making sure that all the different team members are communicating and everybody knows what's going on and we're moving in a direction. We always forget, and sometimes we lose sight of who the most important person is on that team, and that's the injured worker. Because when they feel disenfranchised, when they feel, non-empowered, that's when it goes legal, psych, pain management, and it's very hard to reel that back. So part of the most important thing that we do as case managers, and sometimes we forget about it, is the education piece and the empowerment piece. Because you don't get the trust of the injured worker without making them feel a part of what they're doing. And not only just making them feel a part, but understanding. So many times we're at the doctor's appointments and the doctors are speaking in a different language, or the injured worker is nervous. There's cultural things, there's educational things, and they don't really have a clear understanding as to what the doctor's explaining, and their expectations might not be this realistic. They're going into this program thinking, I'm going to feel like I'm 5, and be very flexible, when you have to be realistic. So a key as a case manager is the time that we spend one-on-one talking to an injured worker in person or on the phone and being their partner. We're everyone's partner, but we really have to make that piece of the injured worker so central, because that's going to keep litigation down. That's going to keep referrals out extraneously, overutilization down. And right now, in my mind, Angel, the number one, I think, overutilization piece in our business is physical therapy. We've talked to a lot of different employers that work with us, and they've limited the number of physical therapy sessions, and they have to have clear, objective evidence in order to continue it. And we as case managers need to explain to the injured workers that they become their own therapist. Therapy is not forever. A good home program, and then they are off doing their own therapy, and it's not forever. So part of what we do is contain the claim, making sure they're getting really good care and getting to the best providers, but also educating them and making them feel a part of what's going on.
Their own care, right? And
Yeah.
and I think that you've hit the nail on the head as well on that physical therapy, because it's something that is necessary to strengthen our own bodies, right?
Absolutely.
And many of us, we're not out. No matter what job we're doing, we're not out at the gym 6-7 days a week. We're not, so sometimes, our bodies are not as strong as they should be when we first begin the physical therapy. But recognizing that a lot of the physical therapy locations are not providing at-home therapy either, at least prior to COVID. Now it's a little bit different, because they're actually, on video, and they're showing them what to do at home, and they're providing them those templates of things that they can do at home. And a lot of the employees continue to do them at home and recognize that if they fall off and a year down the line, their elbow's a little bit sore, sometimes they'll come to us and say, oh yeah, well, I started those therapies that I was doing, a year ago, and it's helping.
Yeah.
So, as that team building and teamwork, nurses are so important for that element of having that communication between the doctor and the employee and the employer. You guys wear a lot of hats. Even though it's nursing, you're still having that total communication and being able to translate, whether it is, medical terms to your employee, or some of your bilingual nurses who are actually able to translate from English into another language, so that our employees across the US, that you work with, are understanding what the doctor is saying. And
so important.
It's a big thing, because I know for me, it's like if we went to a doctor in another country and they're giving us the best of care, but we don't understand it, how are we not, able to take that information home and say, we're going to follow these directions line by line?
Yeah, I mean, really important. And I want to thank you for the kind words you said about our company and our culture. You know, it's so important when this company started to grow that I wanted to keep in mind that this family, but also my case managers are all experienced. And that's what sets us apart from the other companies. The average experience of my case managers, and I was floored, is 20 years. I mean, and that's a lot of time. And I have a case manager, she's in her 80s and she kicks butt. I mean, she's the one that I call 7 o'clock on a Friday to go to the hospital. So, I mean, they're dedicated to what they do. But you're right. What you alluded to is boundaries. And as a case manager, it's so important that we're aware of our boundaries, especially when we have a case manager that's involved in catastrophic claims. Because, you know, when you get involved with a CAT case, you're not just involved with the injured worker, you're involved with their families at a very vulnerable time where they don't understand what's going on. They're scared. They don't know income. I mean, so our job is to kind of help guide them. And it's only natural to kind of develop relationships. But a good case manager has to always maintain those boundaries and objectivity. And my company, our QA, we're always watching that because, you know, listen, I've been there and I experienced it. We're all humans. We have emotions. We get connected to people. But, you know, you have to be objective. And you have to look at the bigger picture. And that's why I like working with veteran case managers, because those are one of the first mistakes you make as a new case manager is you get pulled, you know, and as a case manager, we're dealing with so many different people who sometimes don't have the same agenda. So we're being pushed and pulled all over the place. And when you're new, you just kind of get pushed. But after a while, you realize, wait a minute, I need to stand my ground and here's what my goals are. So that's a really important concept.
And let's talk a little bit about the company outside of workers' compensation, but the company and what you do, which is really important. So you talked about having an 80-year-old case manager. So a lot of times what we see, and not just in nurse case management, not just in work comp, but let's just talk about employment across the world. You know, they're like, oh, retirement, you hit 65, you hit 70. They want to start putting people out to pasture, and they don't recognize that, you know, just at a certain age, the value of their knowledge, of their experience. I mean, that's a big thing. And not only that, they're bringing together mentorship, right? So even if you're bringing in somebody who is a new case manager, or maybe was, you know, a nurse for years in the hospital, but coming over into case management, which has a different dynamic. Now, all of a sudden, you have that 80-year-old person or 70-year-old person or whatever that age is that can mentor and bring some knowledge and guidance to them. How important is that for you?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's super important because, you know, there's sometimes we get in areas where we don't have a case manager who's necessarily 7 to 10 years. So sometimes we have a case manager who's more like 4 to 5 years. But, you know, even if they're older and more experienced, I still have a set of specifications and high expectations when I onboard them. So even though they're used to doing it this way, when they come on, I have a different way about doing things. We're very transparent, very ethical. And some people were brought up in the companies, me as well, that you do this and you do that. So the mentoring is really important, not just to the young, but to the older, but especially for the young. I think it's just so rewarding because one of my biggest concerns, Angel, is who's going into my field. You know, we have a bunch of people. Case management kind of hit their zenith. You know, the first company was Intracor that I started my career in the 80s, Cigna, and, you know, it kind of hit a zenith and then it's kind of starting to decline. There's not as many people going into my business. Then you have a lot of us that are in our 50s or 60s, 70s or 80s that are thinking about retirement. So who's going to replenish? So what I've been doing is doing studies all the time, looking to see where I need to fill in holes and where I need to kind of mentor. I think part of the problem is that people don't really know what case management is. They don't teach you case management in nursing school.
That's very true.
You know, nobody, and I remember the first time or two that I was at a doctor's office, people thought I was a pharmaceutical rep or an attorney. Because, you know, I didn't know what a case manager was. I got my first job with Intracor through a newspaper ad. Excuse me, and I didn't know what the heck a case manager was. So, you know, there has to be more awareness. And part of what I do is a lot of teaching. I used to be a teacher, an elementary school teacher. So I have that huge education piece. It's always, you know, a part of me.
So what even when you talk to people, because you're not talking at people, you're talking with people, and that's my love too. When I'm with people, I love people, but I want that interaction. I don't want to talk at them, you know. And so I love that because you can tell that you were a teacher someplace back.
Yeah, I mean, I love my field. I love my career, and I am worried about what's going to happen. I mean, listen, our whole field with COVID is never going to be the same. It took like a huge eraser and kind of erased a lot of what we know, not only our field conferences, how we do business, how we market, how we interact with each other. I mean, it's taken a huge brushstroke with everything that we've known. And I really don't believe that it's going to go right back to the way it was before. I think companies are really reevaluating corporate locations,
They are.
conferences, policies and procedures. And I think it's just going to be changing the face, and technology is not going anywhere. It's only going to be elevated more. I mean, we see how important technology is to our lives with everything that happened with COVID. So I'm always looking beyond. So in my company, I'm looking, okay, what's the next step for case management? Where can we go from a technology standpoint? So that's something I'm always working on and cooking, in my brain, because I think case management has not used technology like it could have and it should have. We've always kind of been dragged, and telehealth, which you mentioned, we rolled out telehealth right when COVID hit in March. And I had been playing with it for years, and I thought, wow, it's a sexy concept, super cool, but how are we going to apply it? Well, boom, then came COVID, and I rolled it out to 400 case managers in 2 weeks.
It was like a big push. Yeah.
You had to do it. But, that's my example of, we should have been doing that more before this all hit. And I still think there's so many different things as case managers that we could be doing and using technology more that we're not harnessing. So that's kind of where my creative juices, flow for the future stuff.
It's really forecasting. And, within our industry too, we do see a lot of that. There's a lot of fear of something new, right? So people, get very used to what they're doing. They're like, well, it works. There's an extra cost of $5 or whatever it may be. So all of that factors into those decisions on whether insurance companies, TPAs, employers, service partners are going to decide to do something, because they're like, well, how much is it going to cost us? Is it going to be covered? What's the, ROI, all of those different things. The problem is, if they're not being forecasted out right, and we're not staying on top of those trends, then we hit, like when COVID hit, it was the same thing with a lot of defense firms or a lot of companies that were not paperless yet. And, all of a sudden this hit, and people, they were holding back from that cost of getting online. And, while we don't want to go digital, well, digital it's here, it's been here. It's only going to be more important for what we do.
Yeah, and it was interesting too, to interrupt you, because of my model of only using experienced case managers. It's a positive and a negative, because a lot of those experienced case managers don't want to kind of be dragged along to where technology is. So they have that experience and those relationships, but the technology piece isn't necessarily there. So I had a lot of resistance when I initially was rolling out the telehealth and online billing and other kinds of tech things. But they eventually, they come on board, but they need much more support and patience, so it's a whole different kind of thing.
And it comes into back again with that generational, where, now you have your new generation. That's why I tell people, that new generation, those millennials, or those new people who come in who have literally been using, computers and things like that since they were in school. And so they have those skills, those tools that are amazing. So when you have mentor, giving down some, let's say, experience on what they're doing, now all of a sudden you have a young person who's like, okay, now let me teach you in return. And
exactly.
So cyclical, way of giving back. I also want to talk a little bit about what you said, not knowing what case management is. I think it's so important for nurses out there, especially when they have families at home and they're looking for, a different way of working and having the ability to be at home on certain days or whatever it may be, that really, we know working in the hospital doesn't give them that many options. I have family members. I also know other people who are nurses that, of course, are doing those 12-hour shifts. And so tell us a little bit about case management and why it could be appealing to women out there who are looking to pivot their careers, their nursing careers.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So case management affords a lot of flexibility. There's different types of case management. There's telephonic case management, which is where you're coordinating the care of an injured worker, but you're purely doing it by phone. And then there's field case management, where you're there physically in person, going with them to the doctor's appointments, going with them to physical therapy, doing vocational case management, one-on-one. And then within that, there are different kind of subtypes. There's catastrophic case management, which is, again, usually done, being there field. There's task assignments, where it's like a one-shot deal. I want a case manager to go meet one time with the doctor and then back off. So there's different types of case management, but all of them really afford a lot of flexibility. You're your own time manager, and you have to be really organized to be a good case manager, number one. You also have to be able to multitask like nobody's business, because you're spinning 50 plates in the air at one time, even if you have 5 cases versus 20 cases. Certainly if you have catastrophic cases, those are much more labor intensive, and you cannot hold as many of those. But if you have non-cat cases, I usually say holding about 20, 25-ish is when you're still doing a good job. When you hold more than those, you're just kind of putting out fires, and you're not really working the case as well as you should be. But being a case manager on any of those levels gives you a lot of flexibility. We have a lot of working moms, that have very young children. We have all different age groups, but you can kind of set your time a bit, because when you're coordinating a doctor's appointment to go to with an injured worker, if the injured worker is amenable to it, you can kind of schedule it around your schedule. So you're kind of in charge of your own schedule. You have to do your own time management, because you have to have time to document what you do. And make phone calls. But, with cell phones and with laptops and computers, there's no reason why you have to be stuck. Most everybody's doing this remotely.
That's always, I keep saying the positive of what we've seen, is having employers or industries as a whole taking a look and going, wow, we were forced into this, but this is working a lot better than I thought it was going to work. And so having that ability, there's a lot more people working remote from home, and having, that ability to kind of transition their schedules, which is always great. And I think that it is really important, because what we see is, I remember being in high school when I was, getting out of high school, nursing was the big thing. I had so many people, they were pushing nursing. And so we had that transition, but it's not the same. I have a 23-year-old. Nursing was not big. My youngest is actually going to be 15 in high school. And that's not a big component of what they're telling them when they're getting out of school. And so what we're seeing is that curve that, where it was like, okay, everybody was going into nursing. Now nobody's going into nursing.
Yeah.
And so I think that for those nurses out there, or those young people who are saying, what is there an option? I want to help people. I love working with people. I like the medical field, but I don't want to do 12 hours in a hospital. That's not
100%, 100%. And I always talk to, it's funny when I'm there at hospitals with either family or working patients, and you see these, right? And you see these nurses that are so, and this is before COVID, so beleaguered and so exhausted. I always say to them, hey, I should give you my card, think about case management. They're like, wow, because, you do have that patient interaction still that you mentioned, but it's a different level. You don't have all those other responsibilities of having to do that direct patient care. You are having patient care, but you're going with them to the doctor's office. So you're kind of like a little bit removed from where the exact clinical is when you're in the hospital. So it is an interesting transition though sometimes, because sometimes my case managers that have spent longer in the hospitals, they have the most boundary problems, because they're used to being a patient advocate 100%. Now that's not to say as a case manager you're not a patient advocate, but again, you need to be aware of boundaries, because if you become too connected to the injured worker, you're not being objective, and you're not moving the file forward necessarily, because not every injured worker is a malingerer, but not every injured worker is 100 legit. I think statistics like less than 10%, but those malingerers take up 95% of your time, the 10%. But back to the point, it really is a great field to make a difference, but to have that independence and that organization where you don't have to be on shifts from time to time on your feet at a hospital. And especially now with COVID, it decreases the amount of patient interaction exposure, that you have. So I think it really is a great option for nurses.
The one thing I can say about our industry, workers' compensation and insurance as a whole, is there are so many avenues to it. And again, like we talked, I fell in, I got a job as a mail clerk, and here I am. Like,
Right.
12 years later, here I am. But for those people who don't know what it is, they sometimes look at me and they're like, I don't know, Angel, because you got to go to this TPA, or depending on what their skill set is, I'm like, there's depositions, and there's so many different things. And then even if you're on our side, as insurance, I went from claims to operations to risk management. I mean, we have brokerage, we have so many different sides. And
Yeah.
even with nurse case management, it's like taking their skill set and moving it into something new that can be amazing.
Yeah. And I really think it's true. I mean, I think we're all kind of unsung heroes. Like, again, none of us knew about these careers, before we actually got pulled into them. And then think about that. If people would know about these careers, how many more people would be in them? And what would the quality of those people be? And they'd be drawn more, and the staying power, they might stay in the career longer. So, yeah.
So let's talk about some other things that are really important to you. I love to talk about mentoring. So let's move into that, because it is so important. Now we're talking about, bringing new people into the industry, but let's talk about, an experienced corporate woman who has the ability to mentor younger women, or women who are on a different business level, in order to help them navigate their careers and teach them some tips and tools. What do you like about doing that?
Yeah, well, it's really rewarding. Again, I think that taps into my education background. And, being an education person, an educator, you're also getting so much from that person that you're working with. And I think we forget that. And that's the beauty and the added bonus of mentoring is the satisfaction you get, looking at the future, and creativity, the new ideas that you get. I think all of that stuff is just so important. I love working also with young entrepreneurs. There's a lot of women, men out there that have the same journey path as I do. They've decided, what, I've been at corporate, I want to go on my own. And they ask me questions, and I'm always really happy to help them. Like, okay, tell me about your journey. What worked? What didn't work? What would you have done differently now, hindsight, 2020? How do I set this up? What's your advice? And I love doing that. So there's that aspect with people who are starting their business. And then also just the mentoring of case managers, how I do things, my way, what I've learned, what's worked for me, what doesn't work. I'll give you an example. When I have a case manager that it has a opposing counsel, the injured worker has an attorney on the other side, right? I've learned, because I've been burned, that, I tell all my case managers, it has to be in writing only. When you're dealing with opposing counsel, do not, and you're laughing because I'm right.
I'm laughing because if it's not in writing, it didn't happen.
Exactly. And that's the mantra, because I've been burned. I've had many attorneys say, oh yeah, Molly, you can go into the exam room with my injured worker, no problem. And I go in, and then I get a phone call, yelling and screaming. And so it's he said, she said. So that's why I always tell my case managers, it's got to be in writing. That attorney has to give you authorization. And they look at me like, really? Or there's other companies that want case managers to write all these letters, goodbye letters, hello letters. I'm like, no, those are just things that trump up billing. We don't need to do that. And so many times they're like, oh my God, I'm so glad you said that, because all these years we've been taught. Or overbilling. I had a case manager tell me today, I don't do anything less than a 0.2, which is 12 minutes. I'm like, seriously? You read an email or write an email, that's maybe like 5-10 lines, and that's 12 minutes. So these, again, are kind of ways that people were brought up in the industry that I don't think are the best ways. And I think it also casts a shadow on us as case managers. It gives us a bad name and a bad rap. And it causes reasons for people to hire auditing companies. If you're doing the right thing and being transparent and being ethical, it's all gravy. You're getting, I don't want anybody to work for free. Nobody should. But there's a fine line between being unethical and being ethical. You build what you do. That's it.
Ethics are a big part of business, period, but of humanity, right? And so, sometimes when you talk to people and they're like, I didn't know that. And I'm like, take it back to the basics. And I think that, I know in the last decade or decade and a half of me coming in, through my career, and watching other people as their corporate careers have evolved and being mentored and listening, we see that the corporate culture was much different because the bottom line was dollars. So everybody said, look, I don't care how you do it, just do it, because we're either saving or we're grabbing sales, right? So everything kind of revolved around the almighty dollar.
Yeah.
And when that happens, well, our ethics kind of go to the wayside, because the focus of whoever that employer is, if they're saying dollar, 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 well, now your employees are like, I need to keep my job. So that's what they are kind of pushing for. And again, like you said, I mean, it is important. We have to make our sales. We have to work with clients. We have to be paid. And if you're not paid for the work you do, then how are you going to live? We all have those things. But it's really also developing the knowledge of people are important as well. And when you treat people with respect, when you treat people the way you want to be treated, with a kindness, and that doesn't mean that you have to like the person you're working with, but you should be respecting them and treating them with a kindness. And that goes a long way, because all of a sudden, those people remember when they're ready to do business again, who are they going to call?
Yeah, 100%. It goes back to what you said, culture. There's many times, Angel, that I turn down referrals. I hate doing it. But if I can't get the right person there, or, I hear so many stories of like, yeah, they said a nurse would be at the hospital and then she never showed. I mean, that never should happen. So I'm very ethical. If I can't give you the right case manager or too far or whatever, I'm going to be honest and tell you. And, I get so much, positive feedback from that. Like, thank you for saying me and being honest with me and communicating that with me. And that's what I think people want. They want ethical. They want communication. And that develops trust. And then once you have that, your customers stay with you. You don't have to worry about losing them.
Yeah. Know, like, and trust, right? We all know it's a know, like, and trust factor across the board. And even within a company, when you're talking about employees, it's a know, like, and trust. If they know you and they know that you are transparent, that's a big thing for me. I talk to people all the time and I say, you may not like what I'm going to tell you, but you'll know that when I tell it to you, it's always going to be true. And of course, I never want to say something in a harsh way. I always try to make sure that, like our conversation right now, it's honest, and that, I'm always thinking how I would be reacting if it was being told to me. So I kind of play that out in my head before I even have this conversation.
Yeah.
But I've had people come back to me and say, Angel, I don't always like what you say, or I didn't like that I couldn't do this or couldn't do that, or whatever it may be. But I knew that if you said it, then I could trust you. It was truthful, and that means that even when you do have good things to say, then it's even more celebrated, because you're not saying it because you want the pat on the back. You're not saying it because you're trying to win over all these clients or all these employees. And we see that as well, making false statements, right? Because if you're saying, I can get you $1 million in 20 seconds, well, we see those companies and we see those people making those statements across the board, and it's exciting. And so they'll grab, those are those people with those million Instagram followers or whatever it may be, because they have that charisma and they're making those statements. But what happens is they can't retain those people. They can't retain those employees, those clients, those customers. Why? Because they made false statements.
That's right. 100%. It's the long term. I mean, people can get customers. You can get a friend, but it's how you treat that customer, how you treat that friend, the retention, the employee. I mean, I try to, I did pizza lunches for my people. I surprised them. I'll say, okay, and they're all over the country. I order pizza, so they have lunch, on me. I try to do, we went to, I believe so strongly in the first responders and the nurses, the doctors. We sponsored a COVID lunch for a whole floor at a hospital dealing with COVID patients. And, to me, I did that because it was the right thing, not because I want recognition for it. I felt good inside, being honorable. I think everybody has a bullcrap monitor. I mean, I think everybody knows when someone's honest, when they're ethical. But people can put on airs, people can market and do whatever. But I think people know when people are being real and honest. And those are the kind of people you want to surround yourself with, because, those other people, they'll go, or they'll get that customer, but they won't retain it.
Mhm.
They won't retain that customer. I always say you have to maintain your base as well as going after new. And once you get somebody, you just don't forget about them. You have to constantly cultivate that relationship. And it's really all comes down to relationships with my case managers, with the doctors, with the office managers, with the workers, with the providers, our relationships with our customers. And so many of our customers are like friends and family. I get calls in the middle of the night. They have somebody personally in their lives that need help. I'm there to help them. Because, there's important relationships, and they're not just business relationships. It transcends that. And I think young people who are starting off in business, they need to understand that it's about their relationships and being ethical, being transparent, and just being real. Be yourself. You're not going to have everybody who loves you. I always say I'm not everybody's flavor of the month, but, I am who I am. I'm respectful to people. You talked about respect. As case managers, that is crucial. You have to respect the doctors, the injured worker, the providers. You might disagree with them, the adjusters, the employers, but you have to be respectful, of them. And that's the key. I think it's so important.
It is. It's the way that the world revolves. And if you want to be in a place where your career is going to continue to flourish, and just like you said, you do things because you feel good. And so I'm kind of the same way. I have so much philanthropy, and I do that because I know what it's like to not have, and I knew what it was like when I was working through until I could have. And now you take a look at it and you go, okay, well, I have this. How can I help somebody else?
Give back.
Yeah. And it's a humanity thing, because you do get just as much from it emotionally, right?
Yep.
So I tell people, like, Christmas is my big time of year. That's my Operation Christmas Angels. That's my, and people are like, don't you work full time? Don't you? Yes, I do. But you fill your cup.
Don't you always think, Angel, it's always the busy people that always find the time. It always is. The people who have so many, again, it's the juggling the plates. People who can juggle a 50 plate. Okay, give me 5 more. No problem. Because, you just, you see that life is short. I believe you want to grab as much as you can, treat people the way you want to be treated, and leave a footprint. When it's your time, leave a footprint. I have a child, I'm a parent, as I know you are. So I think it resonates even more when you're a parent, because you think about the generations and what are they going to remember about you. My son knows that I work all the time, but, he complains about it, and I understand why. But I also clue him into what I'm doing, how I'm helping people, what mommy does, and, and what's important. And, I think there's respect there. But it really is, it's hard to juggle, especially us as women. We're single, a lot of single parents. A lot of my case managers are single parents. And I'm amazed at what they do and how they do it. I have such respect for single parents, male and female. It doesn't matter.
It's finding that community. And I always tell my kids, it doesn't matter if you're a mail clerk, if you are a cashier in a restaurant, no matter what you do, if you do it with good intentions,
Yep.
It makes a difference. Somebody is going to leave that quick transaction and go, okay, I feel better, or I feel good. It's like a server comes to your table, and if they just smile at you and bring you the service that you needed, all of a sudden you left there and you're like, wow, okay, I'm coming back to this restaurant. Or
Right.
So I always tell the young people too, it doesn't matter what you do. So don't let anybody fool you that you have to be a manager or a C-suite, or you have to own your own company for you to make a difference in somebody's life. It doesn't matter what you do. Going to the grocery store, if you see somebody having trouble pushing their cart, push it for them. It's the simple things in life. Yeah,
it's so important. And I find too, it's been interesting because my background's in psychology. So when all this COVID stuff hit, I looked at how it affected the generations. and how different, starkly. It affected my generation versus a younger generation. Same thing with work ethic. So I see the differences and how that is. And I think a lot of younger generations, they want to be chiefs before they're Indians, and you really need to work your way up into an organization. You said you were in the mail, doing mail. But it was so valuable because you learned all the aspects from the ground up, and and to not learn that and have that background. There's a company we work with, groceries, where they usually promote almost always from within, and those people start as baggers, as cashiers, and then they move up to the C-suite. But all those experiences make you empathic. They make you aware of what other people's plight is, what other people are going through, or how hard they work. Nobody hands anything to anybody unless you're born to a very wealthy family. You had to work, I had to work. But it's the work ethic that I think is key, and that's what I hope my son takes away. Even though sometimes I'm not necessarily with him as much as I really should be, but you have to carve out that time for your family, and that's really important too. And I think as women, that's something that we're balancing so much. And life is going by so fast, and we're in our world now compared to when I was younger. It's such an immediate world. Think of it. Who had beepers? Doctors. They were the only people, right, that needed to be, and they would stand. Right, they would stand up in the movie theater. Oh, the doctor, they have a surgery, whatever. Now we're all 24/7, 365. And we're all ready all the time. And there's a positive to that: the accessibility, the ingenuity, the technology, but then also the stress level. Turning off. So important to turn off and to do what you need to go on a vacation, or to stop looking at your phone a half hour before you go to bed, to exercise, self-care.
It's a consciousness for self-care, because we're also in a world that, let's be honest, we take a look at it and it's like, you got to be in the hustle. Like, if you're not in the hustle, if you're not up moving by before 5 a.m., then you're too late. So it's this constant push.
Treadmill.
Right, it is. And we do want to do that. We want to be successful, and we want to be able to do that. But in doing that, in my own experience, I've also learned that I have spun so many plates that when they fall, we're like, okay, what happened? And that's because I wasn't taking that initiative or making those conscious decisions to go, okay, how am I feeling? Where am I? Taking that status, that self status. And, as a nurse case manager, how important it is, because stress, it can eat away at, not just our emotions, but our minds and our physical bodies as well. And, I do so often, people will say, oh, I called you, but you didn't answer your phone. And I'm like, well, after 8 p.m., it's going off, because I want to be able to sit with my 15-year-old and have that one-on-one time with her, whether we're watching The Voice or whatever it may be. And kind of the same thing with dinner too. That's what I've been telling my husband, because my husband's on call 24/7. Yeah. And I tell him, look, you looked at that phone, and you can kind of tell when it's a 911 or when it's not. So if it's not a 911, we need to put it down while we're having dinner. But it's that constant reminder of, we need to be able to balance ourselves, because we'll run out of fuel.
Absolutely. I just started a few months ago, yoga. What a huge difference that's made, not just physically, but mentally, because it's about taking a breath, and dealing and not letting the noise of issues get into your mind, and keeping that space, quiet, so you can function better, and that you can relate to people better, and not lose your cool, and and enjoy. And we all need to step away. It's so important. My case managers, my team, me, we have to all step away, and you have to recharge your battery. We're human. Especially all this COVID, we've been quarantined and stuff. You need to do what's important and what helps you relieve your stress, whether that's going to your happy place, whether that's physically going somewhere, playing music, yoga, exercise. I take bike rides now all the time, because that's my happy place. I put on music and I'm just bike riding.
change of scenery, especially when we're all, indoors or
Yep.
whatever else it may be. But you're right, because everybody has their own way of kind of calming down and clearing their minds. And for me, it's reading. So if I'm having like a harsh, I will take 10 minutes out and I will put on an audiobook. But every night, like clockwork, I get a cup of tea and I read for 30 minutes
With your
before I
book.
go to bed, right? Because
Yeah.
with my mind going like this all day long, I'm like, I don't want to see reality. I don't want to read reality. So I read some teen vampire fiction or whatever
Oh
it is.
yeah.
Kind of just go, let's dump all that and clear our minds.
Well, I think it's funny. I mean, apart from all this stuff that's going on in the election, I really don't watch the news. My favorite TV show, my husband laughs, is Entertainment Tonight. And he'll like say things to me. He'll like, did you hear there's a war going on? I'm like, what? Because if it's not on Entertainment Tonight, I don't really know, because I just, it's too much. And, you have to quiet yourself and quiet the mind, but still, kind of be aware of what's going on. But that's my, my choice is just to kind of really not watch a lot of the heavy kind of like reality and all those kinds of things. And it's a shame because, again, this world has just gotten very, very fast compared to when we grow up. Kids don't play outside, anymore. So with my kid, I'm always like, you got to go outside, play hockey, do whatever, you go swim. Because it's so important that, you just physically, especially with COVID, you just get out of your space and breathe air and fresh air. But yeah, I mean, it's so important that you have to quiet your mind and to move out of where you are and self-care, because listen, if you're not there and taking care of yourself, you're not going to be there for your company. You're not going to be there for your family. You're not going to be there for your child, You have to really, and it's so hard. I signed up today for a women's mentoring group, and I've been trying to do it, and I finally said, you know what, I just got to do this for me, because I need to carve out that time, even though it's going to be horrible and my emails are going to go crazy, for the 2 hours, but I need to do this for me, and you are in control. So, and again, it's all about priorities. You have to make yourself a priority, because if you don't make yourself a priority, you're left behind. And then you have stress, heart disease, blood pressure, ulcers, and you're no good to anybody. So it's so important to feed yourself,
Yes. And especially as we talk about, especially as women, because each, I would say, season of our life, there's something else that kind of creates. So whether you're a teenager and it's at a time where you're hormonal and I mean, female or male, because biologically your body is changing, your hormones are changing, right? So you get out of that range, and then we get into early adulthood and you're barely getting into a career or you're finishing college. You are sometimes starting a family. So you have that. And then you go into those baby years. Not every woman has a baby, but many times we're going into that pregnancy and that postpartum. And then your next season is you're now coming out of that, into a menopausal. And then you have your next season where you're coming more into retirement and the aging. And so at each one of our seasons, we need to, you keep saying the word like, take that time. We need to learn ourselves. What is going on at this time in our lives? How is our job, our kids, our whatever stress factors, how we eat, how we move our bodies, how is that affecting us? What should we be doing?
Yep, absolutely.
I mean, as a nurse, do you guys talk to, or within your company, or is that something that you guys talk about and really promote? Is that self-help?
Yeah, it's interesting, because I'm always kind of like watching my case managers and keeping tabs on how many cases they have. And I can tell when they're getting overwhelmed. And I'll reach out to them. Hey, you know what? Are you getting in the weeds? Do you need some help? Do you need me to transfer some files?
Like that.
And then, we're very aware of what they're going on in their personal lives, because we became very connected. All my case managers. I had one who lost a husband, another one who lost an uncle, another one who lost another husband. So, we send out candles or or something to them, and they reach out to us. They say, you know how much it means to me that you did that. You're like our family. When they do a great job, I send them like a gift card or even just a handwritten card, to let them know we're thinking about them. But yeah, you develop these relationships and you can kind of tell when they're getting a little too much. And I'm always kind of checking in with them. And also my team, my admin staff and my marketing team. Same thing, I mean, do you guys need a break? I have, some people I have to like force them to take a vacation. Like, you really need to take a vacation because you need to decompress.
It's that innate workaholic in some of us where we think, okay, well, we have all this stuff that needs to be done. And if we're not here, who's going to do it? It's going to be here when we get back. And so all of a sudden our mind starts focusing on worrying about when we get back and we haven't even left yet.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, and it's hard because when you're gone, you're thinking, okay, all my emails piling up and so on, but you know what? You still have to go. Those emails are going to be there no matter what. You have to do what you need to take care of yourself and be there for your family and your friends. I mean, life is short, because I always think of what people say, like when you're on your deathbed, you're not thinking, oh, I should have done that report, or why didn't I do that at this meeting? You're thinking about your relationships and the people that you care about and you love, because that's really the most important thing in your life.
And, I love the fact that you said you actually handwrite notes. That's me. I handwrite notes and drop them in the mail to people. I may not have talked to somebody for 2 years and they'll pop into my head and I'm like, oh, I'm about to drop a line, like just to say, you're on my mind, but also from an employer to an employee perspective, because not all employers do that. And even if it gets big and the company is big and you're looking at a manager, not every manager does that. And it's important and it feels good when somebody who is managing you or who owns the company you work for takes the time out to say, I see you.
Yep.
I see your work. I see you're struggling. I'm thinking about you. I appreciate you. And we're here for you. Like,
so important. And we see in workers' comp, so many times Angel workers will say, I never heard from anybody in my company. Nobody cares about me. And that's where that leads them to go, that disenfranchised cycle, that attorney, the psych, pain management. A lot of companies, they send flowers to their injured workers. They'll send them a card. It's huge because, again, that's making them feel important and, a part of a group, a family, and we all need that. We all need to feel recognized and seen for who we are. So I think that's a wonderful thing to do, Angel, writing cards.
We are coming close to the end of our discussion, but we covered so much information. And it was amazing because first we talk about nurse case management and how important it is for you and your company to make that positive impact on your customers, your clients, the employees that you work with. So that's a big one. 2, we talked about how you are mentoring and letting other people outside of our industry know that, hey, if you're a nurse, case management might be for you, right? And you can make a great impact and a great career within our industry. Do you have any tips, especially we talked about holistic, behavior and self-care. The holidays are coming up. And, as I said, that's my season where I'm going probably 80 hours a week because I'm doing, what I do here, but then I'm doing what I love to do. What are your tips for people out there who maybe are working extra hours to be able to afford the holidays or they're by themselves? We know that there are some people who don't have family, but what is your tip for them to kind of recenter and get through a season that might not be so easy?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many people going through all of this COVID who have lost a loved one, who are single. I was single for many years, so my heart goes out to all the single people because you're isolated anyway when you're single, and then you're dealing with COVID on top of it. It's very difficult. I think my background in counseling is don't be afraid to ask for help. And to reach out, if it's for counseling or a resource or a friend, do Zoom calls, happy hours. I've done that with a lot of my girlfriends, it's great to reconnect with people, even if it's just on Zoom for 15, 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Self-care, be outside. If you're able to live in a place like I do in Florida, you go to the beach, go on a trail, take walking, go biking. Exercise is tremendous for the mind as well as the body, and the endorphins that happen with it. Take some time out for some activity that you really want to do. Disconnect, like we talked about, is so important. Again, we're not encouraged to be with large groups, but if in your circle it's your family, then so spend some time with family if you can. Do what makes you happy. Even maybe take a day and take the day off. Do what you want to do for a whole day. Whether that's just sitting on your couch and binge watching something on Netflix, or that's taking a bike ride on a trail that you haven't been to. Do something to feed your soul. It could be reading a book like you do. Yoga, meditation is so key. I think it's so important to meditate, and you don't have to go anywhere to meditate. You can just breathe and be somewhere. So it's just kind of also just listen to your own body. Your body will tell you what it needs and when it needs it. The problem is we have so much outside noise that we don't hear it, or we choose to ignore what our body's telling us. Some days your body will say, I really need exercise. Other times your body will say, and I did this a couple weeks ago, I did nothing for a whole day, which is so hard to do, but it was so nice. I didn't exercise. I just sat and just did nothing, whether it was watching TV or reading a book, but my body needed that. I needed to kind of disconnect. So listen to yourself, listen to your body. And if you feel depression or need to connect with people, reach out to your resources. Don't be afraid. I always say counseling and therapy is the bravest thing that anybody can do, because it forces you to face yourself, the good parts of yourself and the not so great parts of yourself, and to work on that. So asking for help, whether it's professional or personal, is just important.
Yeah. I actually, each week we've been talking, it just kind of naturally comes up, is we talk about some counseling and we talk about all of that. And for so many times people are raised in an element where it's not looked upon in a positive light. And so I come on here every week and I say it is, because it is not for therapy or counseling or having some kind of communication with somebody who can help you navigate your life or just reflect and help you think and help you overcome some barriers, help you work through some past pain points. It's not for those people who are around you. It is for you. And whether you make it known and open in public, or you keep that nugget to yourself and it's something that you're working for, ladies, it's there for you. Do it.
So important. So important. I mean, as women, women tend to talk to other women about their feelings much more than men do. But therapy is great because it's an objective voice, and who can give you objective ways of dealing with it and other kinds of strategies. And like I said, again, it's so far from being weak. To me, it's the strongest, because you're brave, you're facing things. It's very easy to kind of stuff things down. My theory from counseling, those things always come back out. They might come back out in inappropriate ways or misguided ways, but emotions go somewhere. And especially deep-seated emotions that happen when you're younger, going through a trauma. So I think it's such a gift to yourself to be able to talk to somebody. And find the therapist or counselor that you're comfortable with. Shop around, find somebody that you feel a connection with. And if it works for you, I think it's fabulous. And it doesn't have to be a kind of a long-term thing. You could just have somebody where you go a touch-up every once in a while, But to me, I think it's such an important factor in life. We all need help sometimes.
Yes, so agree. So Beauty and Beast out there, thank you so much for joining us today. And I look forward to seeing you next week. I want to remind you that there are people out there like myself and like Mollie and like your coworkers and your family. They love you. They think about you. Even when we're not close, you are in our prayers and in our thoughts. We give you and send you all positive vibes. I hope to see you again next Thursday. And thank you, Mollie, for taking an hour out to share your experience, your expertise, and your kindness with us.
My pleasure. I could sit and talk with you for hours, and I miss seeing you. Hopefully, I get to actually physically see you soon. Take care, honey.
Okay.
I can, and I